Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question, and that is to go into a little bit more in depth on the psychopathic communication style. When we talk about someone who is psychopathic, based on the wiring and structures of their brain, they don't process relationships and the environment the same way. They don't have the same perspective. Their emotions are superficial and fleeting. They don't really, the emotions are just sort of very cursory, just very glossary. They don't really have a deep or genuine sort of internal experience for this individual based on how they're wired differently, known as shallow affect. So it's just like they might have just sort of a surge of emotion and then it just sort of disappears. And they can turn this on and off at will. So in other words, in order to manipulate. One thing you must understand about a communication with a psychopath is it's usually, if not always, to the end of manipulation. It's not just a hello for hello's sake. There's something else behind it. It's not just let's strike up a conversation and talk about A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. It's so that they can manipulate the other individual, the one who is responding, the one who is developing a rapport. So the shallow affect, meaning that their emotions, especially that they feel or show, are short-lived, weaker, and fleeting. So it's just basically very on the surface. It's not felt deep within. So just like you might hear the statement, still waters run deep. There ain't no stillness and there ain't no depth going on with them. So you'll really kind of, once you have been around these types of individuals, work with them closely, had testimony from them, etc., they'll kind of tell you, and you'll kind of be able to observe this, and you'll see how different their energy is, their presence, how they communicate. There seems to be sort of, you can feel it. There's nothing really sort of there in when you're standing in front of them. In other words, you just feel that their presence is just sort of lacking in something. There's just a lack of being anchored or grounded or sort of a genuine transference of energy, if you will. They're just sort of not really there, although they'll be there in a very charming way. Also, you can't really go and talk about a psychopath communication style if you're not talking about pathological lying. These individuals, once again, based on the structures, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the dopamine sensitivity, the testosterone, all this combines to a facility for these people to have sort of a fearless dominance personality, meaning they don't really feel fear or stress if they're lying. They don't have a fear of consequences. And so this gives them the ability to make little and small pathological lies throughout the course of your exchange with them. And this can be, once again, it's important to understand that the manipulation is always, there's always a manipulation to it. In other words, it's just, there's not a layer of just genuine connection or truth. So that's why people kind of feel that they are so separated from their truth because of the high degree of manipulative communication that has been experienced during the relationship. So if you're wondering why you felt lost, why the dissociation, why the feeling of sort of being, like being disconnected from your values or being disconnected from yourself, is because in the degree of experience or exposure of communication that you have with these individuals, they're not operating on the same level of truth. The body knows best. The body knows the gut instinct, the muscle memory, the study of kinesiology, the work of Dr. David Hawkins and others, have been able to test the degree of integrity, the degree of truth, the degree of humanity, and all sorts of different subjects and topics. And the body has what is known as the subconscious mind. The body is the subconscious mind. So everything, all the miraculous abilities of your brainstem, the midbrain, that are millions and millions of years old through evolution, and that sort of chronology has developed and helped to run all that is automatic, your breathing, your heart rate, how you walk, that automatic pilot. You don't have to think about things. That is your subconscious taking over. It's basically running the show. So, and that also is infused with, right or wrong. In other words, you'll stop yourself if you would do something that is wrong. You don't want to make a mistake. To say that would be to be a lie. So people will, register what actually happened, how they feel, what they're picking up. The body knows even more than the conscious awareness. So people who have had a lot of exchanges, communication with a psychopath will, in the interim of it, be separated from their own truth because of the manipulation, the deliberate and calculating manipulative approach and perspective that the psychopath has going on within them all the time. So based on all these components and differential structures, the communication is going to be infused with pathological lying. And it's on a very consistent basis. It's like being exposed to an influence. It's like being just exposed to an energy which sort of disconnects from that authenticity, that genuineness within others. And a lot of people aren't able to correct while they're in the midst of the communication, the relationship. It's not a relationship because it's all a mask. It's all a front. It's all a persona. So while you're interacting with that, subconsciously, your body kind of knows that something a little bit off, but it corrects itself and explains and justifies, oh, well, trust this, trust that. Don't make a big deal out of this. Don't make waves. So part of, when we talk about the communication is to understand that the superficial emotions, the pathological lying, the ability for them physiologically to sort of have this fearless component, which means they're not at all concerned about the outcome or the consequences to others. They're not, most people they just have an automatic morality North Star compass that's guiding them. I mean, just think about your everyday values, obeying the stoplight, obeying the speed limit, not taking someone else's checking account. I mean, all these different things, these are just normal, everyday, commandments that we live by. It's just, otherwise it would be complete disorder. So a psychopath just looks at these and just like, whoof, whatever. They don't resonate with this aspect of being a human being. It's very difficult to sort of put into words if you're not of that sort. But they will tell you that they're just sort of unfeeling. So it's just kind of like they're sort of like rubber. I mean, they just don't really feel what you would consider what really makes somebody human. And so they're not really, feeling these things. So in communication, you're going to receive a lot of pathological lying. You are not going to know that you're being cheated and lied to. It's the deception is, very high level. And not high level good, high level meaning pathological, meaning toxic, meaning disordered, abnormal, very bad. I mean, I don't know what else to explain it as, but not ethical, not with integrity. So the communication is going to also be disordered in a way that they will use and magnify other people's natural tendencies to look at certain things, or to pay attention to certain things, and use that as a manipulation for their best interest, and to serve as sort of a distractory, or kind of make you kind of tilt your head and go, what does that mean? What is the connection? And, so there's usually sort of a disconnect, and then people who are engaging with them usually will launch into sort of a dissociation, or just sort of suspending judgment. And realize that when people suspend judgment about this individual, and there's this pathology going on, is that the psychopath, this individual who has this disorder, is basically getting a reward when they see people being kind of dumbfounded, when they're sort of, just inquisitive and they're not speaking up. They know that they've sort of disintegrated that natural connection within themselves, and that they're just sort of dissociating, meaning sort of checking out momentarily. And for a lot of people, once again, this can serve as kind of a relief, a respite from being responsible. They think that they're engaging in trust with this individual. So to understand also a little bit about the different structures, because of the dopamine sensitivity, these people will go after what they want, just full throttle. It might seem very extreme. They're able to push on and go for something, even though there's a whole, layers and layers of lies going on. If there's something that they want, something superficial, money, food, prestige, status, they want the win. They're going after whatever it is that they want. Once again, it's usually, people would say, why would you go to that length? Well, the psychopath, they really cannot help themselves when they're really going after for something. So the lies compound. The two, the double and triple lives compound. It's complete conflict of interest, conflict of perspective, conflict of relationships. It does not jive within usually one person. So it's hard to explain, and it's not really like a multiple personality disorder, but it's as if they sort of take on the just sort of metamorphosis, if you will, or they just sort of are. There's a pretend personality that goes around depending on the outcome that they're seeking. So the lying, though, you must understand that with the judgment also is affected in a psychopath. Their judgment is affected. They have bad judgment. And there's also a feeling that, once, even though things go awry, even though things go negative, based on sort of that prefrontal cortex inactivity and their ability to use judgment, even when, this is very crucial, I feel, even when they have made a mistake, a grave error, they've been caught in a lie, they've been caught in a betrayal, it's clearly obvious, and, all the facts are pointing, that, even though they might have communicated this, they might completely forget about it, 20, 30 minutes later, 2 hours later, an hour later, and then just keep going. In other words, they don't, recognize when there are negative consequences, and that normally once the negative consequences have been exposed, usually people will just stop. They'll say, well, it's obvious we can't have the relationship. It's obvious you made a grave error. It's obvious that, you did this in the business. It's obvious that you did this in the family. It's obvious that you did this with the bank account. So even though the facts are there, it won't stop them from continuing to go after what they want. In other words, even though the negative is apparent, or there could be negative consequences, all they see is what they want. So the consequences aren't enough to stop them. it's very strange, to see that once they have received consequences and they still want to keep the relationship going, they still want to keep the business going, they still want to keep the family going, they still want to, even if it's on a small thing or a super huge exposure, it's the negative consequences have no bearing. It just does not get set up there. So really important for you to acknowledge and validate that if this has been an experience, that this is a big red flag with a psychopath. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Have a beautiful day.